IG still had a tendency with this team to over dive into you.
For sure, yeah.
And Kai'Sa was like the perfect champion for this, that could just fly into the backline and dive with them. So the style that we used on TL was the same. Basically, we played in spots of the map where we knew they were going to engage into us, and we could have an advantageous position if the gold's even and beat them. And that was the same style we used on Fnatic. But I think the meta just hit them on the head that year. Like, they had the solo lanes that could flex Victor, Ryze, Jace, Aatrox. I think Urgot was strong then. I forget how many. There was like
really, there was like a million things you could put between mid and top, wasn't there? Yeah.
Oh, really? There was like 7 flexes, and we couldn't find champions.
Yeah.
That would
Jace, mate, it was mental how many there was back then. It was nuts, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Scuttle meta kind of hid Ning's weaknesses, which we then exposed on Team Liquid once they put that hey, we're stronger, level 2, we go with the Scuttle, and we just invade you and fight you. Sure, that works if your solos are winning. We can't really beat it at that time, but once that simple way of playing was removed, it was a lot easier to expose Ning. And then Battleland, I never had a high opinion on. Still don't have a high opinion on him, but I still think he was just along for the ride at those events, and I think that's fine. I mean, you need to have role players, but
sure.
The public perception of overrating their bot lane, I think, was a little bit hyperbolic.
Sure.
So.
I mean, as you say, though, the thing that was so crazy about this was, normally, right, if you're a Western coach, like, that's just the end of the story for you. Like, you're supposed to spend the rest of your career, like, every day just thinking about that day, what could I have done differently? Like, you had the maddest scenario ever, because even though you changed teams to Team Liquid, the very next international tournament, literally the next best of 5, you just got to play the same fucking team. And, you know what's mad? They won't even have known you were involved with Fnatic, so, like, you even had, like, an information advantage on them, so it must have been wild, because you just got a chance. People forget, this was the same IG, and everyone now downplays it because they hate on NA. Like, oh, they had all like arguments. Like, bro, if people don't remember, in that group stage, they were dusting everyone off. Fucking G2, T1, they looked like they were going to win this whole tournament, that IGT. They were mega scary. So, like, in this scenario, even though now people downplay, no one expected TL could win this. It was supposed to be impossible. I mean, as you say, all the players were so highly rated. Like, imagine telling fans, like, oh, yeah, like, fucking, like, Jackie Love's going to do worse than, like, Doublelift or something. They wouldn't believe you, or Rookie's not going to outperform Jensen, etc. Like, this series should have been impossible. So give me some thoughts. Like, what actually was done in this series, do you think? Because as you say, to me, it's the most obvious example of, like, I'm sure TL themselves even knew we're not supposed to be favourites. So it feels like they were primed to listen to, like, here's the things we can actually do, because the team played very differently than the usual style, right? It wasn't just like scale up at macro only, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't at all. Like, I've already kind of disclosed this kind of what we did, but before the tournament started, we had all of the preps complete for every single opponent, and probably IG was the most comfortable. Like, the team, once we played them a couple times, we realized like the prep was pretty spot on, and it was like the win conditions were feasible to beat that team. Like Ning was consistently ganking off of wave back, like if the waves crashing in, he would sit.
Oh, it was predictable. You could just sort of see by the wave, right?
Yeah. There's still junglers in the LEC that have this predictability. Sure. I can't expose who those are, but Ning I showed probably 15, 11, like 12 clips, like mainly recent ones, and then I would span it back to years prior, how it's the same pattern, but now it's just a lot more exposable. And then basically we had Smithy just sacrifice his own leads to guard wave pushouts. And then the whole year we were going over map design, like areas in the map that are more suited towards our comp, which I kind of, if you followed like me into TSM, how the teams played, it also was very similar to the style, because I think teamfight meta was, or being able to outwin teamfights on positional advantage is probably one of the better ways to play League.
It's never going to go out of fashion, put it that way.
Yeah, it's never, no matter what meta Riot decides to do with the game, it'll still be an important piece. And this also goes down to lane setups, but yeah, that's kind of the style we used to beat IG. And then there was also a lot of minute stuff in the prep that I looked at I can give, like, if maybe people won't remember this, but there was when IG had Baron in game 2, we had Alistar, and IG were shifting from their Baron siege. They wouldn't, whenever they're shifting to their third side lane, they wouldn't check the side lane middle bush after T1, and like Core got a flank on their back line when they were sieging that from that bush on Alistar, where like it just completely neutralized their Baron, which ended up giving us Elder or something, if I remember correctly. But there's like many instances where the prep was utilized to beat them in game. And then in draft, the meta was also kind of aligned for us. And also during the group stage, the team built confidence playing against them because all of our games versus IG were really close.
That's true, actually. The one thing people forget is, even though obviously IG was beating everyone in this group stage, the difference is they used to stomp other people in like 20 minutes. TL was like hanging in these games, I remember.
Yeah, because like a lot of the way IG snowballed fit poorly against how we how we played the game.
Yes.
So over zones of control is was one of the core ways to beat them. So like it just so happened that stylistically we're close enough to how to counter them, and then also on top of all the prep, and then just overconfidence. Like we had nothing to lose. Like it was like either we're gonna if we went, like people were expecting us to win one game as a success, so it was any games would be positive. And then after game 1, it kind of just snowballed. And yeah, and then in terms of 2018 Fnatic, I think the finals could have gone either way, but like IG wouldn't scrim us, the Fnatic team, leading up to the semifinal.
Right. Okay.
Because they scrimmed us one time, we like 5-1'd them, and they got tilted for the whole day.
Okay.
And so they wouldn't even warm up versus us. So I really think that was also like, if we woke up on a better day, we could have maybe won, but I still think IG was heavy favorites.
Okay.
Due to the other stuff we already talked about, like the meta hitting them on the head.
By the way, in Liquid, I actually do want to ask about the way this team was set up as well, because obviously this is the era where this was the year where Corejj is there and he's winning like the MVP. Doublelift's still there, of course. But one thing I noticed was very weird is I actually felt like a lot of people like talked shit on this bot lane dude, because what they expected was, it's like because of Doublelift and Doublelift's reputation, like to actually get props, he has to almost just be like Uzi Eye and just be like win every lane, like get every kill, just play like and that, if you notice in this era, especially with Corejj did, that's not at all how this bot lane played. Like there's a reason Corejj got all the MVPs. Like it was way more controlled team. Even like we're talking about the team setup, this is a team that often came from behind and scaled up and won in team fights. Yeah. Like, so what would you describe? Because if to me it's one of those ones where there must be more nuances to what was going on here, because I've heard like in your ear you thought this was a pretty good bot lane and it functioned very well in the game, right? So what was the style of how you use these players, do you think?
I think it was a constant playing. It was like on a string where Core wanted to play the more vision control river style to play, and Doublelift wanted to play more lane focused, which I think both have warrants. I think we more so tilted towards Doublelift style of play, but we still use Core to control. But we just played mid to bot. I think Core in the future years just preferred playing roaming style. So I think it was finding the tightrope balance between the two. But I think especially that year, it was advantageous that we played towards bottom, because I think if you play away from Doublelift, you're not going to utilize his strengths as much. I think maybe now you can, where he can play more weak side. But at that time in 2019, if you have to think back, like that was the year where he was he was lane dominant. I think that was his still peak of his powers in terms of his play. And then Core was still good enough in lane at the time. I think his lane phase has fallen off as the Enchanter meta has kind of rose up. I think Core used to be really good at the Enchanter meta. That's when he won Worlds in 2017, when it was like Ardent meta. But I think after years of focusing on engages, his skill level and that dropped off. But I think now, it was constantly pushing Core to go back to bot lane instead of sitting around mid or top or roaming to an extent. We basically, with the map design stuff, we stressed to Doublelift the spots in the map that he could fight in per his champions. So that stuff matters most for carries, because they're dictating the team fights. About like, okay, you have a front to back comp, or you have like a certain champ that can't get flanked. There's like, you don't want to be extending past these lines on the map. Here's the logical reason why. Here's 20 clips of people doing it poorly. are getting exposed for this reason. And once the AD carries, if they're carries, like they understand and they truly believe in it, then they can call, hey, I'm just not going to fight. I'm not going to fight here. So the rest of the team impact will not extend forward because the carries aren't extending forward. So it's if you teach a couple of roles in the team, the concepts, then the rest of the players will usually have to play around those conditions. So it's sometimes you don't need to teach the whole team concepts. You teach the whole team concepts, but certain roles need to understand them, understand more in depth why.
Yes.
And if they have big enough personalities, which Doublelift has a big enough personality, then it's not an issue.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.